If it's Thursday, the Trump administration cracks down on its critics and TV networks in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, as late-night host Jimmy Kimmel gets pulled off the air indefinitely after accusing Republicans of playing politics with Kirk's death. Plus, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s hand-picked panel of vaccine advisors begins a high-stakes multi-day meeting that could shake up childhood vaccination schedules amid a leadership crisis at the CDC. And President Trump meets with UK Prime Minister Starmer, telling reporters that Russian President Vladimir Putin has let him down, but failing to outline what comes next as Ukraine and its European allies call for tougher sanctions. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where the White House is cracking down on what it deems the radical left and moving to retaliate against some of its most outspoken critics in the wake of the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. The White House has publicly called for consequences and firings of anyone whose comments are seen as endorsing Kirk's death. And administration officials are cheering the indefinite suspension of ABC's Jimmy Kimmel in the wake of comments the late-night talk show host made in his monologue Monday night. Here they are.
We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Kimmel's suspension drawing outrage from Democrats, Hollywood stars, and labor unions representing writers and actors who are decrying the move as a violation of free speech. ABC's decision came hours after Nexstar, which owns more than 30 ABC affiliates nationwide, announced that it would preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live on its stations in light of the host's remarks. And as President Trump's FCC commissioner, Brendan Carr, issued threats against the ABC affiliates.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, you know, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
We at the FCC are going to enforce the public interest obligation. If there's broadcasters out there that don't like it, they can turn their license into the FCC. But that's our job. And again, we're making some progress now.
This morning, Carr suggesting that Kimmel's suspension was a business decision by ABC's parent company, Disney, while also warning that there could be additional fallout.
Our goal and our obligation here is to make sure that broadcasters are serving the public interest. And if there's local TV stations that don't think that running that programming does it, then they have every right under the law in their contracts to preempt it. And we'll see how this plays out. But I do think that, again, we're in the midst of a massive shift in dynamics in the media ecosystem for lots of reasons. Again, including the permission structure that President Trump's election has provided. And I would simply say we're not done yet with seeing the consequences of that.
The president this afternoon on Air Force One suggesting he could pull broadcast licenses from networks who are critical of him.
I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I got 97% negative, and yet I won it easily. I won all 7 swing states, popular, I won everything. And if they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr.
The president, meanwhile, also announcing on social media that he was designating Antifa, a loosely affiliated group of anti-fascism activists, as a major terrorist organization. That comes as a source tells NBC News that the Trump administration is planning actions against certain liberal organizations it accuses of contributing to political unrest and violence against the right. Vice President J.D. Vance issuing this warning last night.
That is not a both sides problem. My friend is dead because of left-wing political radicalization. And if you want to cut that out, then be honest about it and look yourself in the mirror. We are working very hard to ensure that the funding networks for left-wing violence, that the radicalization networks for left-wing violence, that if you encourage or fund your fellow Americans or anybody else to commit acts of violence because you disagree with political speech, you are going to be treated like a terrorist organization, and we're going to go after you.
The White House's vow to avenge Charlie Kirk's death by going after democratically aligned groups and critics is the latest example of the administration pushing the limits of President Trump's executive authority while also raising serious questions about free speech and censorship in this incredibly volatile moment in American politics. Joining me now to discuss this, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley, and Washington University Law School professor and National Constitution Center president and CEO Jeffrey Rosen. Thanks to all of you for starting us off. Vaughn, let me start with you. What more are you hearing from the president and the White House about the Kimmel suspension?
Right. The president on that same aircraft ride here back to the United States, he said that the evening shows, all they do is hit Trump. Quote, they're not allowed to do that. This comes down to just what exactly does the FCC under Chair Brendan Carr intend to do? Because so far, most of these actions here by the networks or the broadcast licensees have been made through sort of unforced obedience, if you will. In this scenario, you had Nexstar, which has a $6 billion acquisition of Tegna, another major broadcast television licensee, on the line, in which they need FCC approval. It kind of mirrors what took place back in July when the CBS, it settled a lawsuit with President Trump. Days later, CBS canceled the Colbert Show, and just about 10 days after that is when the FCC under Brendan Carr approved the merger between Skydance and Paramount, a seismic merger. And so this really calls into question here, as you heard from Brendan Carr, is what other steps do others take here? Because the FCC has already launched an investigation into other news network entities here. And so for Brendan Carr, he has made clear what the mission is, but it's a question of whether they will seek to actually impose fines or revoke licenses, which would require a long FCC and then legal process after that in order to actually revoke any licenses of entities that they believe have been not using their licenses in the public interest.
And Vaughn, take me inside your conversations with your sources. Do you have a sense of whether FCC Chair Carr was acting on his own when he made that threat to ABC affiliates, or was it in conjunction or at the direction of the White House?
We know that Brendan Carr is somebody who was first appointed by President Trump to this FCC post. And we know from conversations dating back into 2023, when Brendan Carr was the author of the chapter on the FCC in Project 2025, that this was somebody who the administration was going to heavily rely on to take actions against networks and media outlets that it perceived to not be providing fair TV coverage. And the president on Air Force One was just asked about Brendan Carr, and he said that it would be up to him effectively who they intend to revoke the licenses of. And so there is a level of affirmation and a level of acknowledgement of the actions within the FCC, which is supposed to be an independent agency that we haven't seen act sort of in this political regard dating back to the early 70s when Katharine Graham at the Washington Post at the time had broadcast licensees down in Florida for several local TV stations, and the Nixon administration attempted to, or threatened, I should say, the Katharine Graham to take away those licenses as they broadcast Watergate reporting coming from the Washington Post. So really this is unprecedented dating back to the early 70s. And so for in many ways here, this is a White House that is getting exactly what it wanted. And there are serious questions for others in the broadcast network entities that are trying to seek either acquisitions or mergers ahead about whether the FCC will be willing to approve, understanding that the votes of these FCC members that have been appointed by Trump are going to be imperative to ultimately them getting through what their intended business acquisitions or deals are.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard from the White House, thank you so much for your great reporting. As always, I do want to turn to Ryan Riley, who joins me here on set. Ryan, can you break down for us what exactly is Antifa and what would this terrorist designation actually mean in practical terms?
Yeah, well, as Trump's former FBI director, Christopher Wray, said, it's more of an idea than an organization, right? This is not a really well-organized top-bottom, just by virtue of being an anti-fascist organization, they sort of don't like the idea of a hierarchy, right? So it's not as though they're electing leaders and have due-paying members and whatnot, and they're just there's basic principles to of what they do. Obviously, the black clothing is a major thing, but in terms of the designation, well, I spoke with Mary McCord, who's the former head of the Justice Department's National Security Division, and it's essentially meaningless. There's this
so it's symbolic.
It's
basically.
symbolic, right?
Yeah.
He can say that, but there's no law attached to it. For acts of domestic terrorism, if there's a federal conviction, what happens on the back end is you can seek a sentencing enhancement, but there's not a standalone charge of domestic terrorism. Charlie Kirk's assassination, for example, vaguely fits the definition of an act of domestic terrorism, but it's difficult for federal prosecutors to find a charge to charge that with. They're exploring it, but you have to be a little bit creative with federal law to find a way in.
So, Ryan, what exactly would the consequences be of this designation if it is, in fact, more symbolic than anything else?
I think that, we did this the first time around, right? They did this Antifa designation. Yeah. Again, I was going back, I was like, I wrote a story about this 5 years ago, right? And during that time, William Barr and the FBI turned a lot of attention towards these Antifa organizations, and they didn't really come up with much because there's not that much organizing really going on. It's not like a Proud Boys type of organization. It's not like these other types of organizations. They kind of just coalesce around certain, areas, and it's just not like a membership-based organization. It's just more, and there's a lot of different kinds of people within that coalition. It's anti-fascist, right? So it's like they're against government overreach, government power. That's not the type of organization that has this very specific ideological movement like you see from a Proud Boys, when they stormed the Capitol, for example.
Yeah. All right. Ryan Riley, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for your insights. We really appreciate it. Jeffrey Rosen, let me turn to you. You are an expert in constitutional law. The ACLU put out a statement in reaction to Kimmel's suspension, saying that this moment represents a, quote, grave threat to our First Amendment freedoms. What are your thoughts today?
The networks are private companies, and in some sense, they can have on whoever they want. However, there is a Supreme Court precedent saying that the government cannot pressure private companies to punish individuals because of their speech. And there are two cases in particular that were decided in 2024 that suggest that Kimmel possibly could have a Supreme Court case if he could establish that ABC was acting in response to the government's threats. In particular, the court held in a case called Vulo that New York couldn't pressure insurance companies not to do business with the National Rifle Association because that was punishing the NRA because of their speech. And there was a second case called Murtha that held that the Biden administration couldn't jawbone or pressure social media companies to take down COVID speech that they called misinformation. So with those two cases, the head of the FCC got up and said that we're going to do something about Kimmel's speech. And if Kimmel could prove that ABC acted in response to the FCC's threats under those two Supreme Court cases, he might actually have a claim.
Well, I guess the question is, where is the line drawn? That line between, look, this is a private company versus you're violating someone's First Amendment rights.
Exactly. And it's a very hard line to draw. Even in that case involving social media companies, the Supreme Court said, well, it's not clear that the media companies were really acting in response to Biden's threats. If they were acting on their own, they're allowed to do that. And here we had the head of ABC say this was a purely business decision. So ABC is going to claim they were not acting in response to government threats. And in fact, the timing of the threat suggests that it may have come even after the firing. So these are not easy to prove factually, but just let's remember the basic principle in America. The government can't punish people because of their speech, because of criticisms of the government. That goes back to just after the American Constitution was drafted and the Adams administration passed a sedition law, making it a crime to criticize the president. And Thomas Jefferson said that's unconstitutional. And about a century later, the Supreme Court agreed. So that's the backdrop of all this. Proving it in practice before a court might be difficult, but that's why it's such an extremely serious time for free speech in America.
So could this potentially be the start of a slippery slope when it comes to the government censoring what people can and cannot say? Right now, there's a Republican in the White House. At some point, there's going to be a Democrat in the White House. What's to say that the Democratic president won't take action against conservative hosts?
That's exactly the fear. And that's why a bedrock principle of our First Amendment is that the government cannot punish people because of their speech. It's complicated in a media age where speech platforms are controlled by private companies and they have business interests that are separate from these free speech interests. But the fear is that the government could indeed, by pressuring private companies to fire its critics, do exactly what the framers of the Constitution hoped that they would not do.
What are you going to be watching for moving forward, specifically with this Jimmy Kimmel case, but more broadly, as the administration says they may take action against liberal organizations?
I'll be looking to see whether organizations, liberal, conservative, or just media organizations, because that's really what we're talking about now, whether any of them stand up behind their reporters and the people who are appearing and back them up rather than firing them. Some of the newspapers have tried to do that. President Trump has sued the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Both of them have refused to back down. By contrast, law firms have tended to make deals with President Trump. But when it comes to the media, it's a very important question, and the ultimate decision is going to be in the hands of the people who run our media companies themselves.
Well, Jeffrey Rosen, we really appreciate your insights in helping us unpack this and understand this urgent moment a little bit better. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, the escalating fight over free speech and the fallout. We're digging deeper into the Trump administration's crackdown on its critics and the warning from a former president, plus from the front lines of the redistricting battle to the race to turn Texas blue. Meet the Texas state Democrat running for Senate as his party searches for a breakout message and a new leader. You're watching Meet the Press now.
After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America.
Welcome back. That was President Trump during his second inaugural address earlier this year, vowing to bring back free speech. Yet in his first 9 months in office, we've seen the president use the power of his office to crack down on media groups, universities, and law firms that he disagrees with or who oppose his agenda. Joining me now is the panel. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief for USA Today. Anthony Coley, former director of public affairs at the Department of Justice during the Biden administration and an NBC News political analyst. And Sarah Matthews, former Trump White House deputy press secretary and spokesperson for Home of the Brave. Thank you all so much for being here. Susan, let me start with you and just set the stakes of what everyone is witnessing in this moment.
Well, conservatives have long felt that they were being censored from the public square. But we're now seeing a really deliberate use of the powers of the federal government to make sure that conservatives have a voice and that liberals feel threatened. We had the president himself say today that TV stations should lose their licenses if they broadcast so much things that are only critical of him. Now, he didn't say things that incite violence or foment terrorism. Things that are critical of him should be grounds to lose their federal broadcast licenses. And that is territory we really haven't been in for decades and decades.
Sarah, I wonder what you make of this moment. And I'll read you what Charlie Kirk tweeted. This was back in 2024. He said, hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech. And all of it is protected by the First Amendment. What do you make of what you're witnessing?
I really think that the Trump administration's actions kind of fly in the face of Charlie Kirk's legacy. Whether you agreed with him or not, he was someone who was willing to engage with those who strongly opposed him, go have those hard conversations and have a spirited dialogue. And as he noted in his tweet, hate speech, whether you agree with it or not, I support the First Amendment, which means I will protect your right to say what you want, whether I agree with it or not. And that is what I believe as a conservative. And it's so sad for me because the Republican Party has largely moved away from that now, as we see, where Donald Trump has just eroded what it means to be a conservative in America. And I think that him taking these actions and those that are staying silent about it, it's dangerous because it sets us on a very slippery slope of what could happen in the next administration. If there's a switch in power, the Democrat president could go after those that he sees as his opposition, and Republicans wouldn't be able to say anything about it. So I think that we're on a really dark path right now, and more people need to be speaking out against this. And it's just ironic, too, because Republicans are supposed to be the ones who are against weaponizing government and against cancel culture. And that is exactly what we're seeing play out.
Right. Well, speaking of the Democrats, I want to play some of what we heard from some top Democrats on Capitol Hill. Take a listen to what they had to say. Anthony, get your reaction on the other side.
Trump is making it 100% clear that he is going to ramp up his efforts to use the power of the federal government to harass and punish his critics. Not because they're supporters of political violence, they are not, but because they have the audacity to openly oppose his policies. This is a standard format for every budding despot.
One of the great hallmarks of our country is free speech, whether you agree or disagree. And this administration is trying to snuff it out. They don't want people to even speak when they don't like what they say. That is the road to autocracy.
Anthony, very powerful language there. Right. Are Democrats doing enough if this is the moment that they are describing?
So Democrats are doing what they should do, but the reality is if we are ever going to break the fever of Trumpism, it is important that the country hear from not just Democrats like Chuck Schumer or Barack Obama, but that we hear from moderate Republicans, people who are respected by the millions of non-MAGA Trump voters who came out and voted for Donald Trump. So Barack Obama can appeal to the 6 million or so Democrats who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and who stayed home in 2024. But breaking the fever of Trumpism requires Democrats, Republicans, everyone who is pro-democracy and pro-Constitution to speak up in this moment.
Sarah, you're nodding your head. You agree with that?
Yeah, that is what I believe as a conservative, is that I believe in the Constitution and the First Amendment, and we are seeing it under siege right now, whether it's the Jimmy Kimmel or Trump suing the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times for their reporting. Obviously, I believe those are frivolous lawsuits that have no basis, but he's going after them because he doesn't like what they reported about Jeffrey Epstein, and he's trying to silence the opposition, and that is a very, very dark thing happening in this country. And so we need to see these Republicans grow a backbone and speak out against it. But I'm not going to hold my breath. I've learned enough to not do that in this day and age. But this is something we have never, not in recent memory, seen in this country. So
you don't just need moderate Republicans, if that's a phrase that still applies, to speak out against it. You really need a reaction from voters. And one of the things that has been surprising, I think, to some Democrats is that this is a threat to democracy argument didn't hold sway in the last presidential election. Doesn't seem to, even though voters are aware, I think, that some of these things are going on, it's not the thing that really motivates them. And we've seen caving by big universities, by law firms, by some media companies, and it has not really awakened like alarm in the public like we might have expected.
But we can't let things go, right? You just had a wonderful segment about Jimmy Kimmel, right? So this caricature that the right is creating of Jimmy Kimmel, they are ignoring the fact that a few hours after the unfortunate, awful assassination of Charlie Kirk, Jimmy Kimmel used his platform to both call it horrendous and monstrous. But you don't hear the chair of the FCC talk about that because it doesn't fit this caricature that they're trying to create. But so everybody has a responsibility here, Susan, to stand up and to speak out when they see these people using this moment, not to educate the public, but to motivate their base and to advance, to use this tragedy to advance a political narrative.
You know, you did talk about former President Obama. We are hearing from him. I want to play a little something he said earlier this week. This was before Jimmy Kimmel was indefinitely canceled. Take a look.
We have to recognize that on both sides, undoubtedly, there are people who are extremists and who say things that are contrary to what I believe are America's core values. But I will say that those extreme views were not in my White House. I wasn't embracing them. When we have the weight of the United States government behind extremist views, we've got a problem.
Susan, what is the impact of former President Obama speaking out? Some Democrats say he should be out there more. Others say, and Anthony's raised the point, it can't just be Obama. I mean, how do you see this?
Obama has tremendous standing. I think he's the most respected Democrat on the scene. But he's a former, right? He's not going to run. He can't run for president again. Right. And the dilemma Democrats face now is that they don't have a face. They don't have a spokesman. That's true. There's no one who stands for the Democratic Party.
Anthony, is there anyone who you see as a leader right now taking charge in this moment?
The voters. It's obviously going to come down to them, right?
Yeah.
Elections are about the future, right? One of the things that Bill Clinton used to say all the time, don't stop thinking about tomorrow. And the leader of the Democratic Party is going to be somebody who has that mantra, don't stop thinking about tomorrow, and creates a future that everyone can hold on to.
Final point, Sarah.
I will add, too, that I think for the next leader, whoever it is in 2028, we need someone who's a unifying force in this country, who's bringing back respect and civility into our politics, and not someone who's pouring the gasoline on the fire, which we've seen President Trump, Vice President Vance do in this situation. And it's sad because this time calls for bringing down the temperature, and all I've seen from them and plenty of others on the right is raise it.
All right. A really wonderful conversation today. Thank you so much, Susan, Anthony, and Sarah. Appreciate it. Coming up next, he's a rising star in the Democratic Party, trying to steer the party's message in a different direction from deep red Texas. My interview with state lawmaker and Senate candidate James Talarico is next. Keep it right here on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Turning now to Texas, where the primary in Democrats' long quest to flip a U.S. Senate seat is shaping up, with State Representative James Talarico announcing his bid for the seat currently held by Republican John Cornyn. Last week, Talarico, viewed by some as a rising star in the party, was one of the party's leading voices in Texas's redistricting fight this summer. And joining me now is Texas State Representative James Talarico. State Representative Talarico, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about where this country finds itself. In the week since Charlie Kirk's assassination, we have heard administration officials say they plan to, quote, go after the radical left and their political rivals. What is your reaction to this broader moment we're living in?
Well, I think this kind of blame game, this kind of finger pointing, this kind of polarized politics is what got us into this mess in the first place. And so I think it's time that we all step back and realize how the systems that we're all in, the political system, the media system, the information systems, how those systems are intentionally dividing all of us, dividing us by party, dividing us by race, by gender, by religion, so that we forget how much we all have in common, to forget the ties that bind us together, because those ties are at the center of this American experiment of ours. And if we allow those ties to loosen and unravel, then we won't have an American experiment to continue. And I hope this moment this crisis is a reminder and a wake-up call to all of us, regardless of our political affiliations, that we all have far more in common than we realize.
Of course, Charlie Kirk's funeral will be this Sunday. How do you see his legacy, State Representative?
Well, I had an event in San Antonio a few hours after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and I thought about canceling that event out of respect for Charlie Kirk and his family. But I decided to change the event from a political rally to a community gathering to talk about political violence, to talk about how we can speak past our differences and how we can come together as a community in these horrific moments. And that night, I think, was inspiring for me and for the folks in San Antonio, because people showed up who weren't just Democrats. There were independents, Republicans there. There were people who admired Charlie Kirk, people who vigorously disagreed with Charlie Kirk. But we all gathered at this little neighborhood bar in San Antonio and had a conversation about the future of this American democracy and how we can cherish the bonds between neighbors that have been weakened over the past few decades. I hope that is the rebirth from this tragedy. I hope out of this death and this violence and this destruction, something new and beautiful can rise up. And I hope it's a renewed commitment to the ideals of this American experiment in self-governance.
I want to ask you, State Representative, a little bit about what's happening on Capitol Hill right now. Senator Murphy, who could be a potential future colleague of yours if you are successful in your campaign, had this to say. Take a look.
I think Kimmel is just the beginning. I think you're going to see a potential dizzying campaign of political repression against anyone who opposes this president. This is a red alert moment for the country. It's super serious. Obviously, we don't have an obligation as Democrats to provide the votes for a budget that is being used to destroy our democracy. So I think it's even more important today that we tell Republicans, if you want to pass a bipartisan budget, that it's got to have at least some protections in there to try to stop the degree of Trump's lawlessness and his attacks on our democracy.
So there you have Senator Murphy basically saying this battle over the budget is much larger. It is about taking on the Trump administration. Do you agree with using government funding as a bargaining tool in this case?
Well, I believe in the Constitution and I believe in checks and balances. And so the legislative branch has a moral responsibility in this system of ours to check the abuses of power from the executive branch. I'm obviously not a member of either branch of our federal government, given that I'm a state legislator at the moment. But I do believe that all of our federal lawmakers on both sides of the aisle should be looking at every tool in their toolbox to figure out how to maintain a balance of power in our federal government.
Would you support, just to dig a little bit deeper, would you support shutting down the government if that were the way to push back against what Democrats perceive to be a budget that basically bolsters the president's agenda?
I would be for keeping all options on the table. I think these strategic discussions have to consider every variable and every factor. I'm not privy to those discussions, not involved in those discussions, so I can't speculate on what I would advise or choose to do in that position. But I would be for considering all of those options, including a government shutdown. You know, back in Texas over the summer, my state legislative colleagues and I had to take a dramatic step of breaking quorum to shine a spotlight on this redistricting power grab happening in Texas and across the country. So I'm not afraid to use every tool in the toolbox when necessary, but it's important to be strategic, to be responsible with those tools, especially the tools that are a little more unconventional and a little more extreme.
I want to talk to you a little bit about Democrat strategy right now. You have talked broadly that people across the country want to see a fighting spirit from Democrats. You've also decried what you have called the blood sport of politics. How do you square those two sentiments? What should the strategy and messaging be right now from Democrats?
Yeah, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, I called for a new kind of politics, not a politics of fear or hate or division, but a politics of love. Now, love sometimes people think is weak or they think it's passive. In my experience, love is neither of those two things. In my faith, love is the strongest force in the universe. Violence and fear and division, those things may win in the short run, but in the long run, love always wins. And so that's where I'm putting my money on. I'm putting my faith in that love in our system of governments here in Texas and across the country. And that love sometimes requires us to stand up to bullies. It sometimes requires us to stand on our principles, even at great cost. And so I would urge that folks not just consider how to inject more love in our politics, but consider what that love demands of us. And sometimes it means taking a stand and fighting back.
Well, let's look specifically at your campaign. You're going to be in a Democratic primary against, among others, Colin Allred, who you campaigned for, actually, in the last Texas Senate race. He lost by 8 points. So let me ask you, what makes you confident? What makes you think you can succeed where he didn't, given that 8-point loss?
Well, I just talked about a politics of love, so let me start by saying something nice about my opponent. I believe Colin Allred is a good man, and I consider him a friend. I was out there trying to help him defeat Ted Cruz in the last election. And at the time, I said Ted Cruz was one of the worst senators in America, with all due respect to Senator Cruz. But now I think that title may be up for grabs when I look at the Republican field in this Senate race. And so I think Texans are going to have an opportunity in 2026 to hold John Cornyn and Ken Paxton accountable for their actions as elected leaders. That's the purpose of elections in this country. And John Cornyn was the deciding vote on the big ugly bill. Ken Paxton's crimes are well known. I was part of the bipartisan majority in the Texas legislature that impeached our corrupt attorney general. And I believe both John Cornyn and Ken Paxton must be held accountable at the ballot box in this upcoming election. I hope to be a part of that as the nominee in 2026.
All right, well, we are going to be watching your race very closely. State Representative James Talarico, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your perspective at what is really a critical time for the entire country. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up after the break, the future of vaccine access in America. A key panel in charge of issuing recommendations to the CDC is meeting right now after Secretary Kennedy fired and replaced everyone on the committee. A leading expert who was ousted from a different HHS vaccine advisory group joins me straight ahead on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Today, the CDC Vaccine Advisory Committee is kicking off 2 days of meetings with major implications for vaccine policy. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy recently overhauled the panel, firing all 17 of its experts and replacing them with his own picks, including vaccine skeptics. Today, that revamped panel is reviewing key childhood vaccinations, including hepatitis B and the combination of measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox vaccine. And it is set to review the COVID-19 vaccine as well. Recommendations from the group typically influence insurance coverage for shots, as well as state and local laws on vaccine requirements. Now, this meeting comes after fired CDC Director Susan Menares testified at a congressional hearing Wednesday that Kennedy pushed her to pre-approve the committee's recommendations, even if they lacked scientific basis. Senator Bill Cassidy, chairman of the Senate Health Committee, this afternoon announced he was inviting Secretary Kennedy to respond to Menares. The committee has not shared when this could take place. Joining me now is Dr. Paul Offit. He is the director of the Vaccine Education Center and infectious disease physician at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's also a former member of the Vaccine Advisory Committee to the FDA. Dr. Offit, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let's talk about what we heard from fired CDC Director Susan Menares. She told a Senate committee just yesterday that Secretary Kennedy had already planned changes to the childhood vaccine schedule before today's advisory panel meets. Talk about what your big takeaways were from her hearing and your concerns about what she testified to.
Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been consistent. First, he fired 17 people from the ACIP, claiming falsely that they were all in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry because he doesn't want to be surrounded by experts. He doesn't want to have people tell him that his fixed, immutable, science-resistant beliefs about vaccines are wrong. And then he met with Peter Marks, who was the head of CBER, the Center for Biological Evaluation and Research, which is the vaccines and biologicals part of the FDA. And he said to Peter Marks, I want you to show me data that the measles vaccine causes blindness, or that the measles vaccine causes deafness. Peter Marks said the vaccine doesn't do that. Those data don't exist. So he fired Peter Marks. Now he has Susan Menares, who is going to stand up for the science. She's not going to just be bending a knee to RFK Jr. when he says, jump and follow these sort of anti-vaccine, science-averse things that I do. And to her credit, you know, she stood up, and she stood up at this committee hearing. But this is an ominous sign, frankly. And until somebody in Congress or President Trump stands up for the health of this nation, we're in trouble.
Well, I want to play a little bit of what Senator Cassidy said during the hearing and then get your reaction on the other side. He gave a very impassioned support of vaccines. Take a look.
Today, what are you hoping comes out of that meeting?
Well, sanity. Something which is based upon science and not upon prejudice. Something which is defensible.
Should Americans listen to the recommendations out of that?
What's that?
Should Americans listen to the recommendations?
What do you make of what we heard from Senator Cassidy?
I don't know how much more information you can have from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that he is hell-bent on making vaccines less available, less affordable, and more feared. It's who he is. It's who he's been for 20 years. He hasn't changed just because he's not being paid by Children's Health Defense, which was an anti-vaccine group, and he's being paid by you and me to represent the nation's health. They keep waiting for this guy to be accountable, and they don't hold him accountable. I mean, he was at that last committee hearing, the second of the confirmation hearings, and he just misrepresented fact after fact after fact. He holds up a study saying, you know, here's a study showing that vaccines cause autism, when in fact it had never been peer-reviewed or published in a scientific or medical journal. Why do we keep waiting for this guy to be somebody other than he is? I think Senator Cassidy was duped.
You know, I want to ask you about what we're actually seeing right now, which is that the rate of childhood vaccinations are actually dropping before Secretary Kennedy took office. What do you think needs to happen given that and given the potential threat that you could see the spread of infectious disease?
Well, it's more than potential. We've had a measles outbreak in this country that's probably involved about 5,000 people. 3 people have died, which is the same number has died over the last 25 years. We've had 2 healthy young children die. That's the first child death in this country since 2003. We've had 270 children die of flu this year. We haven't seen that since the last flu pandemic. And we have 10 whooping cough deaths. Last year, we had 2 whooping cough deaths. And where is RFK Jr. in this? Is he standing up and saying we need to vaccinate our children? These are preventable diseases? Not at all. And I think this is only going to get worse. And you're right. I think when people see somebody like him, RFK Jr., as an anti-vaccine activist, being the head of Health and Human Services, I think they think there must be something to this. Maybe we really shouldn't be getting all these vaccines.
You know, there is a major health insurers group saying that it will continue to cover vaccines even if they're not recommended by the CDC. Could that be potentially significant and offset some of what you're seeing and talking about?
It's very significant, and it's really heartening. They're doing, frankly, not only the right thing for the health of children in this country, they're doing the right thing for financially. I mean, it's much cheaper to pay for a vaccine than to pay for a hospitalization. So I would really applaud their stance.
All right, Dr. Paul Offit, thank you so much for joining us today, giving us your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, pomp and protest, the takeaways from President Trump's historic state visit to the United Kingdom, and what he told reporters today about Vladimir Putin letting him down. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. President Trump is now on his way back to Washington after his 2-day state visit to the United Kingdom. The visit kicked off yesterday with pomp and pageantry featuring a royal welcome and a lavish state banquet. While the focus today was on some of the thornier diplomatic issues like the U.S.-UK trade relationship and the ongoing efforts to bring about a ceasefire and peace deal in the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Joining me now is Sir Trevor Phillips, anchor of Sunday mornings at our sister network, Sky News. It is always so wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining us.
It's lovely to see you, Kristen. And I've just popped out of my dinner because, as you know, everybody in England has a 50-meter table for dinner every night. So I've just popped out.
Well, we appreciate your popping out just momentarily for this very important conversation. Thank you. I'm curious what your key takeaways were. Obviously, a lot of pomp and pageantry yesterday, but today, President Trump, Prime Minister Keir Starmer got down to business, and we know that going into that meeting, the Prime Minister was aiming to really press President Trump on the issue of Russia and Ukraine.
Yes, indeed. Today was a day of substance. But I will just say one thing about yesterday. If there's going to be an impression left, if you like, from the pictures, the stars of the 48 hours, I'm afraid, were not the guys. There were Melania and Princess Catherine. And you can see them there. And I suspect that will be the image that people will be talking about, that these two women really dominated, if you like, the pictures without saying anything. However, as you say, the president and the prime minister, they had a little business to do on the side. I think that the Brits are very, very pleased that there is a deal signed, particularly in relation to technology. And they're saying here that it's worth something like £250 billion. That's getting on for $350 billion. And that a lot of the big tech companies were participating. Now, there's a question I think that's going to follow there, which is, what has actually happened here? Is there a partnership that's been created, or has Silicon Valley bought some of England and plans to dominate it? But I think everybody thinks that's a good thing. What perhaps has not been so certain has been the question of what the trade relationship, particularly on tariffs. There's still a big tariff on our steel, and I think the British government had hoped that something would be done on that. We haven't had any announcement on that, and I suspect that there won't be any change on that. So that's a bit of a disappointment. And I think, lastly, the issue that the Prime Minister and the President perhaps divided on was the question of Gaza, where I think the government's plan to recognize Palestine has displeased the White House. But generally speaking, it's all smiles. We're all brothers in arms. And I think the President went away tremendously happy about the greeting he had here from the King and the royal family. I don't think he went away with the dukedom unless there's something we haven't learned yet. Who knows?
We haven't broken that news yet, but I think you're right. I do think that he very much appreciated the welcome that he got there. He said something that got a lot of attention today about Vladimir Putin. He said he has let him down. But the big question is, what's he going to do about it? We know that he's been pressuring European allies to impose secondary tariffs with the United States, kind of a show of force. And the big question here is, will President Trump move to directly punish Putin? Is he going to sanction him? Do you think there was any type of progress toward any type of direct punishment on Vladimir Putin?
I think the words were tough. But I think you have to look at the precise wording. And though people talk about Donald Trump as though he's the freewheeling guy who says the first thing that comes into his head, in my opinion, that's not true. I think he's pretty careful. He knows what he says, what he's saying. And on this particular topic, he has sounded much tougher. He expressed his disappointment and on his in his friend Vladimir Putin. He said this today that he thought that would be the easiest of the conflicts to settle, but it's turned out to be the hardest because Putin, as you say, has let him down. But he is talking about imposing further sanctions, but on the condition that the Europeans essentially take the brunt of sanctions. Because what he said again at the press conference today was, well, I want to do all these things. I want to be tougher on Putin. But what is the point if you guys in Europe are still buying Putin's oil? So he's given himself a get out here that unless the Europeans take the lead and take the hit, then it's not up to America to take tougher action, which is not quite what I think people in Europe want. They want America to take the lead.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the pressure is going to ramp up on President Trump, both from European allies and his allies on Capitol Hill, to do exactly that. Sir Trevor Phillips, thank you so much. It is always so wonderful to have you. We really appreciate it.
Kristen, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And if I may say so, never mind Melania and Catherine, you're looking great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you make my night. Thank you. We'll have you back very soon. Great to have you.
See you soon.
We are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News stations. I have an exclusive Meet the Moment interview with Mel Robbins that you don't want to miss. There's more news ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.